In Serbia, the protests, which have been going on for more than a month, became more radical on the night of June 30th. It is reported that the participants of the protests in Serbia, who are demanding the resignation of the government and early parliamentary elections, have started blocking streets in Belgrade and other Serbian cities, as well as building barricades. In response, the authorities began mass detentions and repressions, and the country's president, Aleksandar Vučić, stated that he would not meet any of the protesters' demands. My name is Alexei Pechi. Today is June 30th. In this episode, we'll discuss what's happening in Serbia and how much the protests there are actually becoming radicalized. But before we start this episode, I ask you to subscribe to this channel, give it a like, leave any comment under this episode, and be sure to subscribe to my Telegram channel. The link to it is in the description of this video. There we post breaking news as it comes in, and I also publish my analytical reports there.
Subtitles by Stoite.
So the protesters in Serbia have started blocking streets and building barricades. In particular, in Belgrade, they blocked 24 streets, including Požeška Street, which leads to the center of the Serbian capital. In addition, the road blockades have affected several other key cities and major highways, which are now paralyzed. The organizers of the protest made the following statement, quote, "After the ultimatum was not met and following the mass arrests of citizens and students yesterday and today, gatherings of citizens across Serbia decided to block intersections, roads and streets in their municipalities until their demands are met." Against this backdrop, the Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Internal Affairs of Serbia, Ivica Dačić, stated that the police will closely monitor the situation in Belgrade. And he urged citizens not to create situations that could lead to clashes with the police. A new wave of large-scale protests erupted in Serbia on Saturday, June 28th, when the country celebrates Vidovdan. This is the main Serbian nationalist holiday. I'll explain a bit later why I called this a new wave of protest. According to the Ministry of Internal Affairs, 36,000 protesters from all over the country gathered in the capital, Belgrade. At the same time, according to the calculations of the independent organization Public Assembly Archive, 140,000 people took part in the protest. Well, if we take the average between 36 and 140, there were definitely up to 100,000 people. In the evening, the situation began to escalate. Clashes with the police started. It was reported that the protesters attacked the police with sticks and stones. In response, law enforcement used tear gas, pepper spray and stun grenades to disperse the protesters. After that, the Serbian Ministry of Internal Affairs reported the detention of dozens of people. And now, one of the main protest movements in the country, called Students in Blockade, has accused the police of violence and of obstructing medical assistance to the injured. According to local media, since Saturday, large-scale protests have been taking place in Belgrade, with participants demanding the resignation of the government and early parliamentary elections. Slavia Square in the city center, near which many government buildings are located, was completely filled. And that's when the authorities of President Aleksandar Vučić decided to show that he also has supporters. At the same time, in Pioneer Park in the city center, supporters of Serbian President Aleksandar Vučić were holding a rally. They set up camp there several months ago to form, a human shield in front of his headquarters. Let me rephrase. This is very reminiscent of the events in Ukraine in 2014 when there was the Maidan, which were absolutely peaceful protests. And then Yanukovych's authorities started creating the anti-Maidan with Tajtuški, who tried to somehow oppose the Maidan. And now in Serbia, Vučić's supporters have simply lined up rows of tents in front of his headquarters and claimed that these are just Vučić's supporters protesting. In reality, though, they are actually shielding his headquarters with a human shield. And here a very interesting episode occurred. As local media report, on the night of June 30th, around 10 p.m. local time, the peaceful demonstration ended and some protesters moved toward the park where supporters of President Vučić are located. And so, pro-government media write that with nightfall, radicals appeared who hid their faces, lit flares, and attacked the police, including with sticks and stones. In response, law enforcement used force. And all this was happening starting at 10 p.m. But strangely, exactly an hour before that, at 9 p.m., the president of Serbia, Vučić, made a statement in which he said that soon, specifically in an hour, he expected violence from the demonstrators who are against him. And some have already seen Vučić's statement as a provocation, or even as a kind of call by Vučić to an as yet undefined group of radicals to engage in these provocations in order to discredit the protest. And after what happened, one of the main protest movement's students in blockade accused the police of violence and of obstructing the provision of medical assistance. Activists also placed the responsibility for the escalation of the situation on the authorities, saying that all of this is Vučić's provocation. And now let me remind you that mass anti-government demonstrations by students and the opposition have been taking place in Serbia since the end of 2024. They began after the tragedy in the city of Novi Sad, where 15 people aged from 6 to 74 died as a result of the collapse of a concrete canopy at the entrance to the railway station. The protesters hold President Aleksandar Vučić and his party, which has been in power since 2012, responsible for corruption in the country. They say that the canopy at the entrance to the railway station in Novi Sad had just been repaired. There had just been a large-scale reconstruction of the station and a huge amount of money was spent. And as soon as the station was opened after the repairs, that canopy simply collapsed on people and killed 15 people. The protesters say that, of course, no real repairs were done there. They just laundered a lot of money. But Vučić said, well, things like that happen. And since that moment, protests have been taking place across Serbia. Vučić had previously rejected demands for early elections, emphasizing that they would not take place before the end of 2026. And I should note here that the second and, by law, final presidential term of Vučić himself ends in 2027. I'll leave it at that. Share your opinions and conclusions in the comments below this episode, subscribe to the channel, be sure to hit the bell, and don't forget to like.